35-year-old Nikki Elise, also known by her Twitch name as Sajidine, was born in the Philippines before her family emigrated to the United States when she was just a child. She gained notoriety by playing and streaming the real-time strategy PC game known as Dota 2, or Defense of the Ancients 2, and eventually became an integral part of the Dota 2 community, managing one of many professional teams that take part in esports competitions. But back in 2014, Elise was subjected to one of the most terrifying ordeals ever captured on webcam, an incident that would be witnessed by thousands of her fans, and one that would cause them to fear for her life. One night at around 3 o'clock in the morning, Elise was streaming Dota 2 from her home in Tempe, Arizona. It was a regular chill night of gaming for her as she worked through from round to round, thanking her fans as they resubscribed and commented on her efforts. But suddenly, Elise heard a noise coming from another room in her residence, a loud banging noise that she initially ignored but then decided to investigate. Her viewers waited with bated breath, anxious to know just what was going on in their favorite streamer's residence. Then, a male voice from the other room can be heard aggressively shouting, "On the ground, now! Get on the ground!" Viewers initially speculated that it was some kind of police raid, that Elise had been swatted by a jealous rival or a vicious online troll. However, in the moments that follow, an armed, masked man can be seen entering the room that Elise is streaming from. He aims the pistol around the room, ensuring it is clear before beginning to grab a series of valuables, including Elise's guns, a laptop, some phones, and some credit cards. Only then was it clear that Elise was being subjected to a violent home invasion. The armed man then actually looks up into the webcam and realizes that the entire event has been captured live. Not just that, but it has in fact been broadcast to hundreds, possibly thousands of online fans that have no doubt contacted law enforcement on their favorite streamer's behalf. He then turns off the lights in the room before approaching Elise's computer and disconnecting the webcam, effectively ending the livestream there and then. Elise later stated that the two gunmen also shouted, "Where are the narcotics? Where are the narcotics?" at her as she kneeled in the hallway and attempted to avoid eye contact. So it's possible that the two robbers were trying to pass themselves off as police in order to deter any resistance and make the home invasion seem legitimate. However, in a statement later given by Tempe police, which was backed up by Elise herself, the whole thing was actually just a case of mistaken identity. The actual intended target of the armed robbers was a local drug dealer, who they wished to rob without recourse. Elise also said that the robbers realized they had the wrong target and vocally expressed their disappointment in the low value and volume of the items that they had managed to take, but that her roommate had told the robbers in a panic that he had $20,000 in the bank that they could have in exchange for their safety. At that point, one of the robbers actually seemed willing to stick around for several hours until local banks opened up at 9 a.m., where he could take the streamers hostage where they would withdraw their savings. They even went as far as taking off their masks and gloves, stating that it didn't matter if the victims could see their faces or if they left fingerprints behind, that they would be returning to Mexico once the robbery was completed. Elise's viewers, knowing full well the location she was streaming from, alerted local law enforcement that there was an armed robbery in process. Within minutes, officers had set up a perimeter in the area and enlisted helicopter support in order to apprehend the suspects. Tempe police then ran the doorbell of the apartment, and one of the robbers actually went to the front door to try and inform them that everything was okay and that nothing ominous was occurring inside. That did not convince police officers, who began shouting at the man to get on the ground and announcing Tempe police. Elise and her roommate quickly realized that the cops had arrived and bolted back into their bedroom and into the master bathroom, locking the door behind them and climbing into the tub in hopes that if any firefight was about to commence, the thick porcelain would protect them from any stray bullets. At this point, the robbers tried to flee the scene while the cops cleared the apartment and assured Elise and her roommate that they were safe. Elise actually asked the cops how they knew to make a call to their address, and after taking some statements, the officer in question informed them, to their obvious delight, that someone who was watching their video game stream had called. If Elise hadn't been streaming that night, the ordeal may have continued for much longer, as well as costing them a great deal of money. And after a short foot chase with one of the robbers, they were taken into custody and charged with breaking and entering, possession of a firearm, and aggravated robbery. Once he was caught, the cops walked Elise over to where he was being held so she could ID him, and because he had been so cocky as to show off the bulletproof vest that he was wearing, despite disposing of the red polo shirt he had been wearing, Elise was quickly able to confirm that it was indeed the man that had tried to rob them that they had in custody. In a statement later given by Lieutenant Mike Pooley of the Tempe Police Department, he informed the press that the person who made the original call was in Europe. They called someone here in the United States. That person then called the Tempe Police Department. One of the two suspects involved in the robbery was later identified by authorities as being 27-year-old Eduardo Martinez. However, Martinez's accomplice managed to evade the police and is still on the run from the law. Despite the fact that their fans had come through for them, Elise and her roommate were still deeply shaken up by the events and actually moved apartments soon after since the memories of the incident still lingered in their minds. Elise later stated that she thought she was going to die during the event, so it is easily understandable that they would wish to put the event behind them. We can only be grateful that Elise had a fan base that cared so deeply about her and that came to her aid in her time of need. Indeed, the world can be a dark place, full of people that are willing to victimize others, but the events of that night prove that there is a kind of balance, that for every evil person, there are just as many, perhaps even more, good people willing to help their fellow human. Paul Danino, more commonly known by his online nickname of Ice Poseidon, is perhaps one of the most famous live streamers in the history of the field. Initially rising to prominence by streaming the popular browser game RuneScape, he became a pioneer of the streaming genre known as live streaming or IRL, which simply involves someone live streaming their daily lives and whatever events might occur throughout their day. By 2017, Danino had almost 1 million subscribers, making him a behemoth on the internet streaming site Twitch. However, his streams are also known for their so-called edgy humor, as well as his interaction with his subscribers and viewers through text-to-speech. He is also known for the fact that his viewers often intercept his live streams by using visual clues to determine his location, in a process known as stream sniping. This has led to various memorable incidents, including one such event when a viewer entered the restaurant he was eating in before proceeding to spray the entire place down with a fire extinguisher. Ice Poseidon has also been unfortunate enough to catch some highly unusual and disturbing things on some of his live streams. For example, on a visit to an Italian restaurant in LA, he has a rather frightening encounter with a member of the management team. Ice Poseidon sat down at Cafe Verona, which describes itself as a small, hidden Italian restaurant off of South La Brea Avenue. Before looking at the menu, he scrolls through his phone, perusing messages from his audience before a man approaches him from off-camera. Wearing glasses and a beige shirt, the older gentleman leans into Danino's ears so that the other diners cannot hear what's being said, but the microphone captures everything. "I'm getting about 30 calls about you on my phone," he says, "and I'm a gangster, so you better leave here right now before there's trouble for yourself." His tone is cold and calm, but somehow also brimming with rage, and Danino's face drains of color as the man speaks. "Do you understand that?" the man continues. "You're messing with the mob over here. You better leave now, got it?" Danino apologizes and asks what's going on. "The sooner you leave, the better," the older man states, and proceeds to follow Danino into the street outside while the camera records him staring daggers at his back. But as much as the video is frighteningly intimidating, Danino managed to catch something even more disturbing on film. In another video filmed on Friday, March 3, 2017, Ice Poseidon is seen walking through a crowd and showing off some of the sights of a busy Hollywood boulevard when he spots an individual dressed as the comic book hero Spider-Man and attempts to engage the costume hero in conversation. But when he gets a little closer, he spots someone high up on one of the buildings, appearing as if they are about to jump off. A crowd had gathered to watch, with some others filming and another discussing whether it was a prank or an actual attempt. You see, although the person is not captured on film at any point, Ice Poseidon Danino states that they were wearing a costume of some description. No details on which particular costume, but one can understand why the situation was not taken too seriously by the onlookers at first. What just as a minute ago was a casual, jovial stream becomes tangibly disturbing as Danino's face drops and he begins to ask over and over again, "Dude, what's going on right now?" I think it's a prank," responds his white-shirted streaming partner, to which Dino replies, "It better be a prank." The pair then speculates that it would be extremely unwise for them to be around to film such a tragic event should it actually occur, as doing so would almost certainly result in them being banned from their streaming platform. Yet still they stare up at the building, watching nervously as the person atop decides whether or not to go through with the act. "That's not far enough to die, though," Danino's partner says. "It is wishful thinking at its best." "Dude, that is definitely far enough to die," he retorts, as a visible amount of dread is etched into both of their faces. It is then that the pair begin to walk away from the scene, not wanting to witness or capture on film whatever will come next. However, just for a brief moment, Danino stops and turns back towards the scene, audibly expressing how he'd almost like to hang around to watch the person get tackled by the cops or something. But seconds later, horrified screams can be heard from the gathered crowd. It quickly becomes obvious that the costumed person has thrown themselves from the building, crashing into the concrete sidewalk for all to see. Danino walks a block or two, stony face and obviously disturbed, before he finally stops and kneels to the ground, almost forgetting his camera is even there. As he raises a hand to his temple, we can see that he is visibly shaking, and he confesses to feeling sick at what he just witnessed. Hours after the incident, Danino had not calmed down and tweeted out to his followers, "I don't feel good now. I'm shaking," at just past 2 a.m. the following morning. Although the attempt was captured by the Ice Poseidon livestream happened to be purely coincidental, at the time, there seemed to be a trend of people broadcasting their attempts and successfully taking their lives on live streaming services. A number of people had used the Facebook Live function within the previous 2 months of Danino's video, with the disturbing trend growing so large that Facebook even prompted a response to make it easier for people to report these videos and get help to the person broadcasting them. One of which includes the death of Caitlin Nicole Davis, who hung herself on Facebook Live in a video that had been seen by hundreds of her friends and peers, as well as thousands of other people all over the world. Some had demanded that Facebook block these horrendously disturbing videos entirely once they are reported, with some experts saying the viral nature of the videos led other teens to make copycat attempts. But Facebook pushed back against this idea, noting that they could do more to help the individual in question if the video stream is not cut off. Sweet Anita, a Twitch streamer with just shy of 1 million followers, was at the height of her streaming career when her dream job turned into a living nightmare. For months, a violent stalker shadowed her every move, online and in real life. It's an experience she's been extremely candid about, both on her Twitter account as well as during her streams, telling her audience of how her stalker had been continuously ignoring restraining orders put out against him and how he persists in harassing her. She says she has been consistently failed by the police in the matter, how they have told her directly that they wouldn't be taking the issue any further until actual violence had taken place. But even then, she says that continuing problems arising from the harassment has left her scarred for life. Sweet Anita is deeply protective of her private life, so it's not possible to find out exactly where she is located and thus where the problems are occurring, so we cannot contact the relevant police service in order to gain comment from them. Instead, Anita is putting together a collaborative video featuring other streamers and influencers who have had their own problems with doxing, harassment, and stalking, in hopes that it might protect others from going through the same experiences she had, or if they're currently dealing with issues, that it might provide some form of relief or solace from their suffering. I have a stalker that has been stalking me for quite a few months, actually, Sweet Anita confessed during a recent live stream. They have been coming to my house, they've been sleeping in my backyard, watching the house, and the other day some shopkeepers had to intervene and kind of hold him back while he chased after me. A clearly shaken Sweet Anita told her viewers that the psychopathic obsessive had waited outside her house and followed her to a shop so he could strike when she was vulnerable. When I told him to leave me alone and asked if he had a knife, he didn't respond, she said. And when I said, "Are you going to let me walk home alone?" he said yes, but when I went across the road, he started chasing. It was then that 2 shopkeepers had to actually step in, she said, having to physically restrain the individual so that they couldn't follow her back home. That's not even the worst thing that he's done. He's physically assaulted me. Anita, who is a Tourette sufferer and who had recently turned 30 at the time of the stalking, first spoke publicly about the stalker via her Twitter account. The stalker was caught and detained last night. He had a knife on him, she tweeted. After taking my screenshots, recordings, a witness statement of the assault from me and a friend, not to mention having his confession to harassing me, he's been released with a caution. He has also gone from planning a short visit to my town to moving to a place 4 minutes from me permanently. I'm very used to the lack of protection from the police at this point. I guess I'll have to get used to seeing him around, too. In April of 2020, Sweet Anita announced that she had successfully gotten a restraining order put out on the man, telling of how he had been arrested and convicted of stalking. He had also been banned from entering the town where she lived. There's a restraining order and a suspended sentence of 2 months in prison, she tweeted. I really hope that he honors this and I will finally be safe. But to her horror and disappointment, she later told fans of the news that unfortunately, the restraining order wasn't effective, and her stalker did not abide by its conditions. He didn't honor it. This means I can't make this morning's stream. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm okay, I'll just be really busy sorting things out with the police, she later tweeted. If anything happens to me, I really hope that I'm the last canary in this coal mine. The law needs to change. No job should have such a high risk of assault or death, especially not live streaming. Anita also went as far as sharing some screenshots of the things the stalker had been saying to her over the chat section of her streams, using a different account each time to avoid permanent bans. I'll kill you soon, one message said. Not with a cheap kitchen knife I had last time. No, I'm going to bring something special for you. In an even more disturbing and threatening message, Anita's stalker claimed that he would harm her family. She seems to believe absolutely nothing can be done, as the police seem poorly equipped and lacking in motivation to deal with the growing problem of online persecution. In recent interviews, she claimed to have provided evidence of the messages to the police, but they'd done nothing to deal with it effectively. Since my tweets about the threats went viral, they mysteriously picked up the case again, she said, but they've been telling me that it's not likely or they are uncertain that it will amount to any further action. The police don't even turn up when I call anymore. I have only called them about 4 or 5 times in the past 9 months, which is far fewer times than he has actually threatened me because I've learned that they won't do anything to help. She told of one instance where her stalker mentioned that he would be at her house in less than 15 minutes to kill her, but that when alerted, the police didn't even show up. I feel like they just don't care. They didn't even know what doxing was or that it was a crime when I spoke to each officer that came to take a statement, nor did they even know what Twitch or live streaming was. It feels as though they didn't even understand what is happening, let alone what to do about it. In 2018, it was reported that 55 women were killed between 2015 and 2017 by men that they had previously gone to the police about, and that the number of women killed in the UK rose to 10% in 2019 from the previous year. Frankly, I haven't found a single streamer who's escaped this kind of harassment, Anita said. It's insane. From revenge, constant doxing, threatening people's children, to even trying to abduct their children from school. It's horrific. One particular girl that Anita spoke to was threatened and blackmailed with her explicit pictures for years. They had her sit with a male police officer, where she had to show him the images the stalker was sharing. She felt humiliated, and the guy got a £100 fine and restraining order. He continues to harass her to this day, 9 years after he started. Many different internet personalities have had to live with the nightmare of online stalkers, but platforms simply have no concrete solutions. Twitch confirmed that it is aware of Sweet Anita's case and has attempted to cooperate with her and the police since she reported it. They insisted that action is taken when any incident of harassment occurs, which ranges from permanent bans to contacting law enforcement, but that they are unable to do anything about real-life behavior. Anita says it is a sad fact that she has to wait until the stalker kills her for her concerns to be taken seriously. "My safety is in my own hands," she said. "He has threatened to kill my mom and my animals before me, and every day I wake up wondering if it's my last." On the afternoon of Easter Sunday in 2017, a man began to broadcast a live video from Cleveland, Ohio via the relatively new streaming service Facebook Live. At first, the broadcast seems harmlessly innocuous, simply a man in a car filming himself with one mobile device while talking to a friend on another. The man is African American, appearing to be in his late 30s or early 40s, wearing a blue and black vertically striped polo shirt. It quickly becomes obvious that the conversation is a civil discussion of the man's personal problems, with him complaining that his friends always seem to blow off his problems, that they ain't nothing. He calmly vents his frustrations before telling his friend that he loves him and that he'll call him back shortly, but for him to tune into his Facebook Live broadcast in the meantime. It's then that he tells his friend his username, Stevie Steve. The man's name is Steve Stevens, a vocational specialist at Beachbrook, a behavioral health agency for children and families, and he is about to commit one of the most shockingly brutal acts in the history of the internet. Before Stephen hangs up the call, he apologizes to his friend before confessing to have just killed 13 people. Despite being such a frank and shocking claim, police would later be completely unable to confirm the veracity of such a claim and could only conclude that it was simply to cause as much hype as possible, a push to secure as many online viewers as he could for what would follow. After Stevens hangs up the phone, he begins to address his Facebook Live audience, claiming he is working on his 14th victim and that he was going around hating on people. He then launches into some vague tirade about the whole thing being something to do with a woman, how he never thought he'd ever let a woman get him emotionally worked up to the point of snapping, as he puts it. "I'm 37, and all my life I've been a monster," he says into the camera. "Always had to prove myself, and now I'm killing people, all because of this woman named Joy Lane." This is the first time we hear that name during the broadcast, completely unaware of the fact that for one man, it would be the last name he ever heard. Stevens explains that he walked out from living with Joy Lane just a few days ago on the Friday just gone and announces that today will be known as the Easter Sunday Joy Lane Massacre, even going so far as laughing as he does so. At around 2 p.m., Stevens was driving around the 600 block of East 93rd Street in Cleveland's Glenville neighborhood. It is then that he spotted 74-year-old Robert Lee Godwin Sr. as he was walking back from a local grocery store with a plastic bag in his hand. Stephen pulls over his car before exiting the vehicle, then walks up to the elderly man before politely asking him to say the name Joy Lane. "Joy Lane," Godwin repeats with confusion, obviously wondering just what was going on. "Yeah," Stephen replies. "She's the reason why this is about to happen to you." It's then that he produces a .45 caliber Glock 30S handgun from his waistband and aims it at Godwin's face. The video is extremely distressing to watch. 74-year-old Godwin is powerless to prevent what occurs next. He is far too infirm to run away and is actually so terrified that in his panic, he tries to use the plastic bag in his hand to block the shot. But obviously this does not save him, and after a single shot is fired, Godwin collapses to the sidewalk in a lifeless heap. The comments and reactions in the live stream went into frenzy. As Steven said himself at one point during the stream, a lot of people refused to take him seriously on his claims that he was about to take a person's life. Possibly because of the obviously fraudulent claim that he just killed 13 others, as surely he'd be in a police pursuit by that point, and people definitely have heard about it on the news. But to witness a cold-blooded murder with their own eyes was too much for some people. Those that didn't immediately leave the stream left messages that violently condemn what they just seen, with scores of people telling Stevens they were about to call 911 to report him for taking an innocent old man's life in a way that was so hideously confusing to him. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, a number of nearby locations went into lockdown, including Cleveland State University, where students were confined to dorms and libraries until they received the all-clear. Since Stevens had actually announced his phone number on the live stream shortly before the shooting, Cleveland Police Department actually managed to get him on the phone for a brief time, pleading with him to surrender to law enforcement before he took any more lives. But Stevens refused, telling them he could kill many more times in the name of Joy Lane and would never be taken alive. As a result of such a horrifying statement, Cleveland police enlisted the help of the FBI, which expanded the manhunt beyond state lines to Pennsylvania, New York, Indiana, and Michigan. Newscasts pleaded with residents in the all-aforementioned states to be on high alert and offered a $50,000 reward for any information that would lead to Stevens' arrest on a charge of aggravated murder. It seemed inevitable that Stephen would claim other victims and leave a trail of destruction in his wake. But 2 days later, the lives of an untold number of citizens would be saved by the most unlikely of heroes. Just after 11 in the morning on the Tuesday following the initial shooting, the morning crew of a McDonald's in Erie County, Pennsylvania, found themselves facing a terrifying dilemma. One of the workers there believed they'd recognized Steve Stevens from the Facebook Live shooting. Under the pretense of a shift change, they managed to get a few different pairs of eyes on the suspect before confirming that it was indeed him. Taking their lives in their hands, the drive-thru team managed to stall Stevens by telling him that they had forgotten his order of fries, apologizing and asking if he minded waiting a few more minutes to receive them. Meanwhile, they had quickly called the local police department, telling that they had Stevens in their drive-thru and were stalling him for time. But the killer managed to get wise to the delay and sped off without his order of fries. But it was too late. The police were almost there and a high-speed chase commenced. Stevens hurtled westbound through the streets of Wesleyville, Pennsylvania, determined not to be caught by the pursuing police. The killer then tried to round the corner of Buffalo Road and Downing Avenue in the city of Erie, where Pennsylvania State Police successfully executed a tactical pit maneuver to send Stevens' vehicle spinning to a stop. The officers jumped out of their vehicle with guns drawn, ready to shoot Stevens dead if he attempted to open fire, but only one shot rang out that morning, when Stephen put his own pistol to his head and pulled the trigger, instantly dying as he splattered his brains all over the interior of the vehicle. The incident prompted a huge amount of controversy surrounding online censorship and public safety. The incredibly disturbing and graphic video of 74-year-old Robert Lee Godwin Sr.'s killing had remained visible to the Facebook users for more than 2 hours before it was finally removed by moderators. The delay drew a huge amount of criticism, with many saying Facebook was unfit to be a public platform given its subpar handling of offensive and violent content. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg acknowledged that a lot more had to be done to prevent such things from happening, and paid tribute to Godwin as well as his grieving friends and relatives. Shortly after, Zuckerberg announced that it was bolstering its global community operations team with additional staff who would be trained to actively vet Facebook content for inappropriate content. But the move came far too late for Robert Godwin, whose death had already been seen by hundreds of thousands of people all around the globe, and signaled a dark new chapter in the information age, one where humanity's darker inclinations were not just confined to the dark corners of the internet, but could be broadcast to millions at just the tap of a button. Having recently returned from a tour of duty in Kuwait, Air Force veteran Joshua Peters was wearing expensive noise-canceling headphones during perhaps the worst night of his life. Peters, who went by the username KoopaTroopa787, was using them during a session of playing the extremely popular browser game RuneScape while streaming on Twitch for upwards of 60,000 followers. But suddenly, his viewers heard a panicked voice off camera and had to actually inform Joshua that something was going on in the background. It was his mother informing of the arrival of 10 heavily armed police officers at their St. Cloud, Minnesota residence. At that, Joshua suddenly disappears off camera and was gone for some amount of time. He returned around 15 minutes later on the verge of tears and obviously shaken by the events that had transpired, before he confirmed to speculative viewers that he had indeed been a victim of the phenomenon known as swatting. A cowardly, anonymous caller had contacted the St. Cloud Police Department, claiming to be someone who had lived at the same address as Peters. They pleaded with police to help them, falsely asserting that Peters had shot their roommates and was now pointing the gun at them. Police later said that they had heard the distinct sounds of 2 gunshots before the caller hung up, and immediately dispatched armed officers to the address in question. The act of swatting is intended to facilitate the dispatch of armed police officers to a victim's house or apartment. The object is usually simply to frighten the victim, but in reality, the risks of swatting are considerably higher. The more dramatic and dangerous the threats that are made via the call, the more likely the cops will respond with a high amount of aggression and violence of action. In the past, SWAT teams have shot and killed a man who called a hotline about ending his life, thrown a stun grenade in a baby's crib, and killed more than one family dog. The increased popularity of such a dangerous act has meant that many police departments have become increasingly savvy to the practice and have instituted a number of measures against it. However, given that this was way back in 2015, unfortunately for Peters, the attempt worked. Before Peters ended his stream for the evening, the veteran returned to his computer to explain the situation to his viewers and to send a personal message to whoever had called in the swatting attempt. "I see you posting my address. I had police point a gun at my little brother because of you. They could have been shot. They could have died. Because you chose to swat my stream. I don't care about what you have against me or what I did to you. For that, I'm at a loss for words. Your gripes with me, but do not involve my family in this. They don't deserve this." Speaking to a numerous amount of journalists on the day following the swatting incident, Peters said that he had absolutely no clue as to why he was specifically targeted. "There's no possible persons who I can think would do something like this to me. I've seen this happen to other streamers. I just never thought I would be the one to get randomly targeted. Never. My channel's not even crazy big like some of the other mainstream streamers. I just didn't expect that. I was going upstairs, and before I knew it, my face was on a tile on the ground, hands wide open, and a bunch of police officers with assault rifles." Despite the fact that St. Cloud Police Department had confirmed that Peters was the first swatting attempt their city had ever seen, the officers were indeed aware of the concept, having seen it covered in the media. And so as soon as Peters suggested that it was an attempt at swatting, the responding swatting officers immediately changed their approach, becoming less aggressive and open to the possibility that it was all just a terrible mistake. When we were all laying down, I spoke out. I said, "I stream on Twitch.tv, I'm being swatted, and someone probably prank called us." And then the tone shifted as soon as I said I'm streaming on Twitch.tv. The situation quickly calmed down, with the police officers apologizing for the mistake and leaving the Peters residence before any further harm could be caused. But unbelievably, the situation was far from over, because just a few hours later, the person who called in the initial swatting actually tried to do it again, calling the very same police department and imitating a member of Peters' family. On this occasion, they tried to convince the 911 dispatcher that Joshua was depressed and potentially trying to end his own life due to the danger he had exposed his loved ones to. But thankfully, the police knew to call Josh in advance to confirm the claim, rather than to simply show up with the SWAT team all over again. Peters, who happened to be flown back from his tour of duty in a medical evacuation after a life-changing injury, said the whole ordeal was a horrifying incursion into a personal part of his life where he usually feels content and secure. There's not a lot of things that can get me emotional in this world, but it's been a process getting back on my feet. Today was the first day where everything went smoothly. It was very energetic. Everything was going well in my stream, and then it's like, once again, here's another hurdle to overcome. And this is way worse than anything else I've ever had to overcome. It was like, gosh, let's go back to the other areas I had to deal with that were much more manageable. I'm the oldest of 4 brothers, and to know that a gun was pointed at my little brother, it hits home for me. Minnesota police released a statement saying that a thorough investigation into the identity of Peters' attacker was being undertaken, but Josh Peters himself added in a later stream that there were no clear suspects, and that because of certain VPN services, it was highly unlikely that anyone would ever be caught or charged for the attack. It seems to be a sad fact that anyone in the public eye these days, even relatively small streamers and YouTubers, are open to such forms of abuse, whether it be accusations of behavioral misconduct, swatting attempts, hacking attempts, or worse. It is depressingly disturbing that a single disgruntled viewer, listener, or fan might be able to take such cheap but effective shots at someone who, more often than not, is simply trying to make a living from entertaining their fellow man. On Saturday evening of the 26th of October 2019, 24-year-old Jeffrey Antonio Langford Jr. began streaming on Facebook Live video. The live images showed him sobbing with a blood stain on his left cheek, while he repeated the same word over and over again, whilst in an apparently intoxicated state. "Mom, Mom, Mom," he said as he wept. Langford then showed the horrified viewers what he was so upset about, turning his phone to show them something that was completely and utterly terrifying. It was his own mother, or more specifically, his own mother's corpse. She was covered in blood and had a single gunshot wound to her head. When the cops arrived, having been alerted by distraught Facebook friends of his, Langford told them that he had witnessed his mother shooting herself in the face. However, forensic examiners noted that the blood spray and the placement of the fatal wound indicated something much more disturbing, that Langford had in fact murdered his own mother with a small revolver before apparently rushing to livestream the aftermath. In the moments following the murder of 45-year-old Graciela Laura Holker in North Salt Lake, Utah, Langford streamed 3 videos of himself and her body. He insisted to all that were tuned in that he did not kill his mother, and repeats the claim that she ended her own life in front of him. However, according to court papers, in the very next breath, he seems to reverse himself by saying that his mother isn't dead at all, and insists that he needs to finish the job to prevent her from further suffering. A second video again that Langford livestreamed once again repeats this claim, with Langford promising that he would not be going to jail, because despite what things might look like, he hadn't done anything wrong. A disturbingly revealing statement indeed. Then a further, third clip shows Langford insisting that his mother deserves a good send-off, and that he lost her the same way he lost his dad. This could easily be seen as a plea for sympathy, given that Langford was indeed guilty of the crime and wished to deflect any suspicion of himself. It was later confirmed by police that Langford's father died years earlier, with comments on Facebook suggesting he fell victim to a shooting accident and that the incident coincided with his mother's death. During a police interview that followed the incident, Langford claimed he and his mother had been drinking to commemorate the loss of Langford's father, and that she'd taken a Klonopin sedative pill. Then, in a drowsy, disassociated state, she had walked into the living room and shot herself. But also during the interview, Langford began to make contradictory statements that alerted police to the inconsistencies in the case and drew their suspicions to him. He offered 2 different versions of what he claims happened that evening, stating that his mother had shot herself inside, whilst then claiming that she'd ended her life outside in the backyard. Then, when the police asked Langford why he hadn't dialed 911, He reportedly claimed that he was scared that she would shoot him, which once again caused them to doubt his story. What's more, his mother was found with the gun in her right hand. However, a subsequent police report stated that the handgun was in his mother's right hand, meaning that whoever had fired the fatal shot had also been able to recock the hammer, and obviously if a person took their own life, they would be in no way able to do something like that. Additionally, the handgun's 6-round cylinder was also found to have 3 unspent rounds and 3 empty chambers with nothing in them. The rounds had been fired recently too, meaning that more than one bullet had been fired in the incident, which would be highly irregular for someone taking their own life. Police then found 3 spent casings in Langford's room, away from his mother's body, which was found in the living room, meaning she had been killed in one room, then dragged into another where Langford had recorded the Facebook videos. As a result of the murder of his own mother, Langford was quickly charged with first-degree felony murder and second-degree felony obstruction of justice over claims he lied about his mom's murder. He was also charged with carrying a dangerous weapon while in possession of drugs or alcohol. Despite insisting that he was not guilty of his mother's murder, Langford was sentenced up to 15 years in the Utah State Prison. "I do not take account for what I've done," he said, "but I will not admit to killing anyone. I did not kill her, and she shot herself in the head. I now have 2 parents dead, both from taking their own life, and I'm the last of my line." It was this argument that meant that Langford dodged being convicted of a first-degree felony, and Langford pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of manslaughter. But what's clear is that we may never really know if Langford actually did kill his mother or merely assisted her. But it's painful and disturbingly true that he was present enough to make an actual video of what had occurred that evening, making a public event out of one that should have been deeply, deeply private. Prentice Robinson liked to play music. He was one of 9 children, and aside from a brief stint living in Atlanta, Georgia while pursuing a career in the arts, he lived in North Carolina his whole life. He would often spend his days playing his guitar around the town of Wingate, which is about 30 miles southeast of Charlotte, entertaining passer-by and earning a few extra dollars in tips for his smooth-sounding country blues. But when Prentice discovered Facebook Live, he found that he had a means of reaching a far wider audience than he had before. With just the push of a button, he could show the entire world what a talent he had, not just for singing and playing, but for the storytelling that is the bread and butter of country blues. He could tell stories of sadness and joy, of justice, of rights and wrongs, because at his core, Prentice cared for his fellow man. So much so that he couldn't help but notice the wrongdoings occurring in his own community. Gangsters, prostitution, the drug dealing, all the things that kept his black brother and sisters down in the hole of crime and poverty that they seemed so unwilling to climb out of, in his mind. And then, Facebook Live wasn't just a way to broadcast his music. For Paris, it was a way to broadcast to the entire world the travesties that were being committed in his own neighborhood. He would livestream, as it was sometimes called by him, his walks around his neighborhood, calling people out for their sins. And as brave or foolhardy as it may seem, the number one target for Prentice's righteous indignation were those that peddled illegal drugs. He would record their activities on his cell phone, broadcasting their sales and activities to the world, exposing them for the parasites that they were, and seemed unafraid of the consequences. And consequences there were. Prentice quickly became the target for the drug dealers' vengeful wrath. They would often give heavy discounts to addicts for targeting Prentice in acts of vandalism or robbery, putting out bounties on his personal property or rewarding them for assaulting and harassing him. All they had to do was tune into his Facebook Live broadcasts and reward those who partook in the assaults with free or discounted narcotics. Logically, the highest value target for robbery was Prentice's cell phone. Any drug user who could separate the man from his means of broadcast would be highly rewarded, and one day, a drug user was actually successful in their attempt and managed to steal Prentice's phone, robbing him of not only the item itself, but his means to expose the drug dealer's activities. Prentice then turned to the police for help. In February of 2018, he walked down to the Wingate Police Department to report the robbery. Robinson can be seen walking through the neighborhood, waving to passing cars, contemplating singing birds, complaining about his stolen cell phone, and worrying about the area's elderly residents. "They're afraid of some of the activities going on," he said. "I'm trying to keep the neighborhood quiet like this, peaceful." Using a cheaper model of a phone that he had picked up from a local discount store, he recorded the entire exchange with police officers, including an interaction with Police Chief Donnie Gay, who said to the camera, "Bring his phone back so he can get on with his way today." Prentice then walked out of the police station, still recording using a selfie stick, when he was approached by a man who seemed unfamiliar to him, who was wearing blue jeans, brown Timberland-style boots, and a black and blue windbreaker. Prentice turned the camera to record the individual, who asked him repeatedly if he was indeed Prentice Robinson. Prentice was something of a local celebrity for his music as well as his broadcasts, and had no reason to believe that the man had any ill will towards him. So when asked who he was, he obviously disclosed that he was indeed Prentice Robinson, before showing the man his camera and declaring, "You live," several times, expecting the unfamiliar individual to be pleased to be part of his broadcasts. But to his absolute horror, the man pulled out a long gun from under his jacket and fired 4 shots at Prentice, who collapsed on the sidewalk, mortally injured. Prentice's camera captured the entire thing, including the gunman running off into some trees after having fired the shots. A car is seen pulling up and drag Prentice inside in order to drive him to the hospital in an attempt to save his life, but he was dead by the time they arrived, having bled to death from the massive trauma of receiving 4 large-caliber gunshot wounds at close range. "Oh my God, what just happened?" one person commented on Facebook, seconds after the shooting, as the comment section lit up with shocked users who couldn't believe the brutality that they had just witnessed firsthand. The local community was devastated. A friend of Prentice, Chester Sanders, said the Facebook Live broadcasts likely made people upset. If people don't like it, and they get angry, at some point in time it will start and something will happen. "I don't know if it was the reason for this tragedy to happen, but it happened," another of Prentice's longtime friends, Charles Baker, told local news outlets. "That's just unreal. For somebody to have that kind of heart to just walk out in the open like that and kill a man, it's just nonsense. Only being a block or so away from the police department, if that's not brazen, I don't know what is," Police Chief Gay said, adding, "It's heartbreaking. I can't believe it." Godwin's family filed a lawsuit against Facebook in the aftermath of the killing, saying the social network had the ability to alert law enforcement with more than sufficient time to act and prevent the murder of their beloved relative. In a statement, Facebook said it removed the post because the company couldn't have known if Robinson wanted this horrific act to be live-streamed on social media. A spokesperson added, "We will apply a warning screen to future uploads of the video intended to raise awareness or condemn this tragedy and limit accessibility to people over the age of 18. We will remove instances of video from Facebook that are shared supporting or encouraging such acts of violence." The morning after the murder, 65-year-old Douglas Cleveland Colson, also a resident of Wingate, handed himself into the police department, apparently aware that he had been caught red-handed in the recording of Prentice's murder. He had an extensive criminal history, and it was believed that he was an associate of the drug dealers that Prentice had so heavily offended. Speculation is that the drug dealers in question had become so sick of Prentice's so-called do-gooder activities that they had decided to end them once and for all. Colson was apparently told that if he executed Prentice for reporting the stolen phone, then turned himself in so that the drug dealers would not be investigated for the crime, he would not only be well looked after in prison, but that his family would be provided for while he was inside. It seems like this was way too good of an offer for Colson to turn down, and so that morning, he armed himself and followed Prentice down to the police station. He simply waited outside for the man to walk back out, confirmed that it was indeed Prentice Robinson, and then shot him down there and then. What is depressingly clear about this whole incident is how the darkness of corruption and greed can snuff out even the brightest lights that shine out in our communities. Prentice was a man whose only aim was to improve the living situations of those around him and to bring joy into their lives, be it through music or by the means that, in the end, got him killed. But thanks to the brutal, quick-buck mentality and evil of those he sought to bring to justice, Prentice was murdered before he could ever bring about any real change. We can only hope that the man's story can inspire the greater community to act on his behalf and leave behind a better world than they came into. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data. Located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, I'm a chicken.